Hello everyone. Thanks for attending this webinar series from Quality System INC. In this webinar, we'll cover 21 CFR Part 11 compliance requirement for calibration PM and asset management in the biomed applications. As you know, when you are using the automated solutions or computer systems for managing the processes for the calibration and PMs, we would need to have the compliance requirements before I begin the presentations, I just wanted to give you a little bit about my background. My name is Sanjay Dal. I have been serving as Vice President Quality and Compliance Solutions at Quality Systems. I have more than 20 years experience in quality management and quality engineering fields. So, as you know, there are lots of challenges when you are using the paper-based calibration management systems. It's time-consuming, and you need additional space, manpower to manage the paper-based records, and also there is chance of missing records or misplacing the records. So most of the times we use Excel-based file systems. Again. These are hard to manage and track and the revisions and the controls um, required for managing the file systems. You have to communicate the changes in the file structures with the stakeholders. The location of Excel files can be easily changed, and it's hard to create any reminders in the Excel files. So these are some of the reasons why we go for automated solutions. Again, the automated solutions has its own challenges. As you know, when you are using the automated solutions or the computer system, those solutions or the systems have to be validated and have to comply with 21 CFR Part 11 requirements. So that's what we are going to cover today. So there are two key objectives when you are using an automated solutions. So the software or the computer solutions should be easy to use and should automate most of your manual transactions, which is taking a lot of your time, so that you get value for your investments. The second thing is that when you use a computer softwares for regulated applications, you have to comply with the 21 CFR Part 11 requirement, and also the predicate rule required as for the medical device regulations, or the pharma regulations. So in the first part, we'll cover the basic process requirements, how you can have a good um, system in place before you start using the automated solutions. So the equipment selection and qualification. So those are the basic things, like which are covered in your process validations. So you need to have a good equipment design and selection process in the first place. So to make sure that the equipment meets its need and meets the process requirement, and equipment should be properly installed. So that's what you would cover in your installation qualifications, to make sure that the utilities are available, and the documents, operating documents, are available, and all the checklists that you would need for the installation qualifications are available. And you have to have the formal qualifications and report, which are covered in the installation qualifications. And after the IQ is done, you also need to complete your OQ requirements, which is operational qualifications, and also the PQ requirements, performance qualifications. Again, those are part of the process validation, so we'll not go into the details. And the other part, once you have the equipment installed and qualified, you need to maintain the equipment in good conditions. So that's why we would need to have the preventative maintenance and the repairs as needed. But when preventative maintenance are done, you need to have a proper schedules, and you have to make sure that the date, the individual who are conducting the inspections or the preventative maintenance are recorded. Same thing when you are doing any maintenance activities, the date and individual performing the maintenance activities shall be documented. And the calibration requirements. So the equipment should also be properly calibrated in regular intervals. You have to have schedules so that the equipment is calibrated. When you have to make sure that the limits for accuracy and precision have been defined, and when you find a piece of equipment failing the calibration. That means either it failed accuracy or either it failed precision. You have to create out of tolerance records, and you have to document your investigations, how it may have impacted the release products. And when you are doing the calibrations, your calibration standards should be traceable to national and international standards. And regarding the records, calibration records, so you must have equipment identifications, the calibration date, and the individual who are performing the calibrations. And also you need to have documented procedures for doing the calibration work. So these are some of the compliance requirements as outlined in CFR 820.7. This is the medical device QSR regulation. Um, as we mentioned briefly in the previous slides, the manufacturers shall establish and maintain schedules for the adjustments, schedules for the PMs, and schedule for the calibrations. And when you do the maintenance activity, you have to keep the records that includes the date and individual performing the maintenance activities, and same with the inspections and adjustments. For the inspection, measuring, and test equipments, you have to make sure that it's suitable for intended purpose. Means you have selected a piece of equipment that should produce valid results, and you have to routinely maintain and calibrate, and the accuracy and fitness are to be maintained. So some of these things you can address through the regular scheduled calibrations. um, Again, when you do the calibration, so the equipment identification, calibration date, and the individual performing each calibration shall be maintained, shall be documented. So those are the regulatory requirements. So there is no options for skipping those things, or there is no option for flexibility. So in this part, we'll see how the automated solutions or the computer systems can be helpful, and what are the things you need to keep track of, or how you would manage your computer systems so that you comply with the FDA validation requirements and also Part 11 requirements. So here are some of the general guidance based on the documents from the FDA websites. So the Part 11 compliance requirement is required when records in the electronics format is maintained to comply with any of the provisions of current CGMP. It could be from 21 CFR Part 211 or 21 CFR Part 820 or GLP 21 CFR Part 58. So when you are maintaining the electronics records um, in place of paper records to comply with these regulations, so you have to comply with Part 11 requirements. The definition of validations on the FDA websites is given below. Establishing documented evidence which provides high degree of assurance that a computer system will consistently produce results that meet its predetermined specifications and quality attributes. So as you would see, just testing the software or the computer application is not good enough. You have to have enough objective evidence, or you have to have good systems in place that would give high degree of assurance. Again, it's a subjective things, and so that's the reason why you have to have a lot of systems in place which would give enough confidence that this computer system will consistently produce results that meets its predetermined specifications and quality attributes. So there are two types of systems. One is closed systems and another is open systems. But we would recommend going with the closed systems since it's easier to comply with the Part 11 requirements. Again, the definition of closed system: the systems and the applications in which user access and permissions are controlled. Examples include Windows applications or web-based applications. Mostly the applications where you would need an user ID and passwords to log into the system and access the informations. Again, the open systems where you don't need a user ID and passwords, but you can still meet the compliance requirements using, having lots of SOPs and some, controls checklists to meet the compliance requirements for the open systems. Again, we usually recommend using closed systems for the Part 11 um, compliance purpose. Again, computer systems should be validated depending upon the risk assessment results. So you would need to do a risk assessment regarding the um, result of the computer system or computer applications regarding the impact of the failure of the computer systems. How is it going to impact the users or the the end users or the patients, who how they would be impacted when the computer system fails. So if it's a high risk applications, definitely you would need to have a very high level or very detailed validations. Again, you would need a risk assessment to define the requirements for the computer systems. And the computer systems shall provide audit trails and the corresponding requirements in the Part 11s. Um, we'll go into the detail step by step requirements in the Part 11s. And you should be able to print and export records into the PDF, Excel, XML, and other formats. Protection and retention of electronics records through over the entire life cycle of the records. So here are some of the high risk Part 11 requirements. You need to make sure that you are addressing, or the computer software that you are using for the calibration and asset management addresses each one of them in very detailed way. And the system should have control in place so that only authorized individuals are able to access the systems. Um, and you should have operational system checks. For example, if something, the information is missing, the system should give you an error message saying that these are the required field that needs to be filled in. And you need to have authority checks. Authority check means you need to define the approvers, approver roles, or person who can view, or person who can edit the informations, or person who can submit the results for review. So if you are using a system which have permission controls or the role based controls, it's easier to comply with these sections. And so so another thing we have to keep in mind is the use of device checks. So what this means is that when you are using a computers for data entry, so the user should know that what data the user is entering and what data is appearing in the same device. If you have an external device that's feeding the data into the computer, the user should know that the source of data, and the system shall be validated to make sure that the external data is properly being transferred to the device or the computer that the user is using. The example would be an RS-232 cable, or RS-232 protocol you may be using for data acquisitions. So the user should know that the data is coming through the RS-232 cable or RS-232 data acquisition method. And the determination that the person who develop, maintain, use the electronic system shall have educations, training records. So these are very important to make sure that you have all the training records in place. And you should have qualified people using the systems, and you need to keep their training records. Establishment and adherence to the written policies. To make sure that the individuals are accountable to their electronic signature. So they should know that their ID and password is equivalent to manual, wet signatures. You should have appropriate controls over the system documentation. So you should have the SOPs and the work instructions, how to use the systems and how to maintain the systems. And we'll go into more details regarding the electronic signatures. So here are some of the section by sections and how you can meet the Part 11 requirements either through designs or through internal controls. So let's take a look in more details. So all electronic records can be printed or viewed on the screens. So you should have a system designed in such a way that it should be able to print the records into PDF formats or export the records into Excel or some other formats. And you should be able to copy the data into a removable media. What that means, you can copy your data into an USB drives or CD drives or something. A retention period shall be defined for all electronics records. Um, the objective here is you should be able to retrieve the documents. First thing, you have to define how long your backup should be kept, how long your data should be retained, and in case you have a disaster or something failures, you should have an SOP to show that how you can recover the data if the system fails. And you should use logical security to control access. So the user ID and password would be required to log into the systems. The system shall employ computer generated audit trails independently to record the time, date, and user ID. So when the user is using the system, any changes being made by the user should be tracked in an audit trail. And again, the audit trail should be a permanent records, and no one should have access to make change to that audit trails. When upon making a change to an electronics record, information from previous person shall be available. Again, this is another feature, you can address it through the audit trails, and this should be available in your audit trail. Every changes being made should be tracked in the audit trails. And the sections uh, 21 CFR Part 11 and .10e says that the audit trail shall always be on, and audit trail shall be protected from modifications. As you see how much emphasis is being given on the audit trail, so you have to make sure that the audit trail is permanent and nobody should be able to make changes, and it should always be on at all the time. And the system shall enforce sequencing steps and events of the operations. For example, if you created a calibration records, the users should be able to submit the calibration data, and the approval roles, the approver users with the approval roles shall be able to review it, and once the approval is completed, the record should be closed. Again, you can address this through the system workflow and the design requirements. The system shall use authority checks to ensure that only individuals with right access levels can use the systems. So you can give different roles or the permissions to the users depending on their type of work or nature of work, so that you can control their authority, the level of changes that they can make in the system. There shall be documentations or the training records to show that person who develop, maintain, use electronics records systems have education and trainings. Again, this you have to address it through your offline systems. Like you need to have good quality management in place. You need to have good training delivery and training recording systems in place, so that all users are trained before they use these systems, and you need to have good documentations as well. There shall be control for distribution and access use of documentations. As you said, we just as I just mentioned, SOP and work instructions for the systems operations. You need to have a good SOP with screenshots describing the transaction that users need to do to operate these systems. When changes to the system documentations are made, this it's good to control like the changes to the SOPs in the paper form. If you use another electronic system for controlling the changes, then that system should be Part 11 compliant. And every signed electronic record shall contain, the following manifestations. You should have the full name, full printed name of the user, date and time, and also the meaning of the signature. So all three things should be there: user ID, password, and also option for recording the region and meanings. Electronic signature executed records shall be linked to the respective records. So the over the entire life cycle of the records, you should have the electronic signature linked to the records. As you can capture that in the audit trails. Again, the electronic signature should be linked to the individual records, and there should not be any changes, or there should not be any way where the electronic signatures can be removed from the actual records. And you can have that in the system design itself. The system shall maintain link between electronic signature and its electronic records for the life of that record. So we just mentioned that. The electronic signature shall be made up of two components, user ID and passwords. User ID shall never be reused. Again, this is another thing you need to make sure that you have it in the systems, or you have it in, under your controls. So when you are assigning user IDs, if your system is designed to give you only unique IDs, then that's a good things. If it is not, then you have to make sure manually you are assigning unique IDs to your users. And the system shall automatically log off after period of inactivity. Again, we have seen that when you have 30 minutes inactivity, or 1 hour inactivity, so the system should automatically log off to prevent um, access by unauthorized users. Also, you should have periodic checks. You can set up a password policy, reset policy, so that the system would force you to reset your passwords every 60 days. The system should have a protection in place to prevent unauthorized use. Let's say, there's a good way to do that is to log the user, or prevent the access after 3 miss attempts or 5 miss attempts, something like that. So compliance with the 21 part 11 requirements, as we saw in the previous slides, is very detailed and very thorough requirements. Besides that, before you start doing the validations, make sure that you have an user requirement specifications documented, because that is the basic or basis of the validations. And once you have an URS, assign unique ID numbers for each of these part 11 requirement inside the URS. Again, the URS will cover your process requirements, your functional requirements, and um, the performance requirements for the systems. Once you have URS, then define or document um, the system requirement specifications. If you are designing the system in-house, make sure that how the system is going to perform to meet your user requirements. And once you have URS and SRS, you can create functional requirements, but for our validation documents, we cover the functional requirements inside the user requirements. And then you create your test documents, test ID numbers, assign unique IDs to the test cases. Make sure that you have enough testing scenarios to address each one of your URS requirements. And you can produce a traceability matrix to show the objective evidence that your testing is going to produce results that will confirm that your user requirements have been met. And once you have completed your URS SRS, make sure to review and approve, so that the review and approval signatures are also available for future audits or the compliance audits. And the other things we discussed in the part 11 requirements, you need to have detailed SOPs for the operation and maintenance and operation and control of the calibration and PM software applications. Also, you need to have good SOP for the change controls when you are making any changes to the system documents. And also, you need to have good SOP for data backup and disaster recovery. And make sure to provide detailed trainings for the users and the system administrators, and keep good training records. Again, these are additional documents you would need for the 21 CFR Part 11 requirements. Make sure you have an IQ protocols and the reports when you are installing the software applications on the cloud servers. Make sure that you have a good protocol to define the network requirements and the supporting application that needs to be installed as part of your IQ. And also, you can define the SSLs or the security settings that you would need for the cloud server to work properly. And you would need to create OQ protocols and the OQ report. So the OQ protocol would cover all your test cases that you are planning to do, And once you complete your testings, you can attach your testing results and the screenshots to the OQ protocols. So that will be your OQ reports. And after the OQ, you would need to create an PQ protocols. Some of the test cases from the OQ, you can use that as your PQ protocols. And the data migrations that the product, the master data that needs to be uh, part of the systems should be confirmed or qualified, and that you can cover in the PQ protocols. So the PQ protocols, you can cover the data migrations and the master data that would be needed for the functioning of the systems, and you can do an end-to-end testings or end-to-end workflow uh, testings as part of your PQ. And we provide the PQ protocols for our users, so they're able to run the scripts and create the results and the screenshots as part of the PQ validations. So I used some of the FDA guidance documents and the regulatory documents on the FDA websites as the reference for these webinars. Again, if you have any questions or if you would like to see a copy of the URS or SRS or trust matrix, we'd be happy to give you or share those documents. In case if you have any questions, please give us a call or send us an email at info@qualcy.com. Thank you all.